Welcome to Othar's Garage. In this video, I'll be installing the factory team aluminum steering bell cranks for the associated B6.4 and giving my impressions and review on whether or not this is worth the money. So let's get started. So the pieces are nicely machined and anodized. The one thing that I did notice compared to some of the previous bell cranks is that there's this little cutout right here, and the plastic has that as well. So I think a lot of people might be having issues with the bell cranks breaking because the plastic itself is thinner than it used to be on the B6.3. So we can go ahead and take the top plate off. So we're going to take off these two screws here and the two screws that are in these two holes. So you may be able to get away with not taking off anymore, but I'm going to go ahead and remove the shocks. That way the video can show what I'm going to be working on a little easier. Okay. So if you haven't already installed it and you decide to upgrade, or you've already broken the bell cranks, this is what you're going to need to do. So I think the first thing we should do is take off the steering link from the bell cranks. So I don't think the bell cranks will necessarily make you faster. It's not a go fast modification to your car. I think it's a durability and reliability modification to the car. And I think it'll make the steering feel a little bit more responsive, since you won't have any flex from these plastic parts here. So I have some B6.3 bell cranks, and you can tell that they are thicker than the B6.4 bell cranks. So I never had any issues with the plastic bell cranks from the B6.3, but I can definitely tell that the material here is a lot thinner than the B6.3. So I'm just taking the bushings out and then taking out the bearings. So now we're going to go ahead and take the bell cranks off. Alright, so I took this side off already, so I'm going to go ahead and install this piece here. This piece has the two holes, and we want to install everything with some blue Loctite, because if the screws get loose, then they can end up stripping out the threads, and then these are essentially trash and you need to buy new ones. So I'm going to put some blue Loctite there. Nice and snug. Everything moves nice and smooth under its own weight. So I can go ahead and do the other side. Same thing here. We're going to add some blue Loctite. Now I can go ahead and install our bearings. And I like to install the bearings with the blue seals visible, but you can install it the way that you like. Now we can go ahead and install our bushings. And now we can install the bell cranks onto the chassis. We're installing it onto the ball stud mount. No Loctite is needed on these screws because they are going into plastic. And remember, once you're done tightening these down, make sure everything moves smoothly, because if you over tighten these, it could bind up the steering. And that moves nice and smooth. I don't feel any unwanted binding or friction. Everything moves nice and free. I think the tolerancing on these Bellcranks are much better than using the plastic Bellcranks, so definitely seems to be a worthwhile upgrade so far. So now we can install the steering link onto the Bellcrank here, and make sure to use blue Loctite on this. I've seen someone not use blue Loctite and this has come loose and unfortunately destroyed his aluminum Bellcranks. So there we go. I'm just wiping off any excess Loctite that might be there. That does look beautiful. So let's go ahead and put everything back together. So make sure your sway bar is in place, and we can start putting the screws back in. I noticed when I first built the car that these screws going in from the top mount into the ball stud mount, that if they were tight, they would cause the steering to bind up. So take note of that. Hopefully with the aluminum Bellcranks, the tolerancing is a lot better and there won't be any binding. Doesn't feel like there's any binding. I know it's attached to the servo, but before you could tell that it was binding because the steering didn't want to move at all if these screws are too tight. So now we can go ahead and put our shocks back on. All right, there, it's installed. Now it's time for me to go drive the car, and then I can come back and give you my driving impressions. But before we do that, take a look and compare the B6.3 Bellcrank versus the B6.4 Bellcrank, and you can tell that the B6.4 Bellcrank is much thicker, or the B6.4 Bellcrank is very thin right at this hole, and that hole is going to see a lot of stress because it is connected to the servo itself. And over here you see that that hole has a lot more material around it and probably won't get as stressed. And you can even see here that it has a boss, so it has even more material on top. So definitely think, from just looking at the two Bellcranks, from the old one versus the new one, that yeah, you're gonna have to probably upgrade to the aluminum Bellcrank just because of durability issues. Like I said, I never had issues with the B6.3 one, but with the new changes in the steering geometry, being able to adjust the height of the Bellcranks, and everything like that, I think it's necessary for the new design, and unfortunately that new design doesn't look very robust, so probably best to upgrade so you don't break in the middle of a race. But I'm gonna go drive and then I'll come back and give you my driving impressions on what I can feel. I don't think it's reduced any slop. I think most of the slop is going to be in the ball cups themselves. But if anything, it'll make the steering a little bit more responsive, just because it's stiffened up the whole steering assembly. But I'll be right back and I'll let you know my thoughts. All right, we're back. So you might notice that my car looks a little different than the previous portion of the video. And that's because I actually recorded that bit of video when I initially did the build a few months back. And now I'm completing the video and I'm gonna do my review on the aluminum Bellcranks. So that being said, I've driven with the aluminum Bellcranks here for quite some time, taken a few hits, few hard hits, I should mention, broken the front control arms. So the thing is, I've also let a friend borrow the car, and not the greatest driver, and that's actually when one of the control arms broke. But that being said, you know, the car took a big hit. Nothing was loose up here. I do periodically check the screws that go into the Bellcrank to make sure that they haven't loosened. But so far with that blue Loctite that I've put on, nothing's loosened up over time, and it's been running great. At this point, I've seen a few racers break the plastic ones, and I wouldn't necessarily say that this is a must-have upgrade. I would say, however, that it is a recommended upgrade. I would recommend getting it if you can afford it right off the bat. However, if you can't, I would just save up, wait until you do break it, and then buy it and replace it. It's the same thing for the aluminum bulkhead, this piece here. Don't necessarily say that it's a must-have upgrade, but definitely a recommended upgrade. The only must-have upgrade that I think you need to have is the aluminum diff cover, just because all the ones I've seen leak from the get-go, and that one part will make the car very consistent. Well, in terms of driving experience, I don't think I can notice any difference between the plastic and the aluminum Bellcrank. So I don't necessarily think it's a performance upgrade. I don't think many people will be able to notice it. I would consider myself a intermediate racer. My skills are pretty decent, and I can usually feel something on the car if it's different, even a slight change. But after putting those on, I can't tell if there was a change at all on the car. But it is more robust, it is more reliable in this fashion, so I would highly recommend it. So that's it for my review of the factory team aluminum Bellcranks. I would highly recommend getting it if you can spare the cash. Not a performance upgrade, but definitely a durability upgrade. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please like and subscribe if you did. Let me know down in the comments if you have this, if you had any issues with the plastic ones, and if you had to replace them. Stay tuned for the next video in the series, which is going to be about the direct drive system. So thanks again for watching, and I'll see y'all in the next one.